The Pittsburgh Penguins, they're not good, but the Columbus Blue Jackets, they are even worse.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me on Twitter at synonym for wet. Joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's account at LO_Penguins. We thank you for making this your first listen or watch of the day because we're your team every day. And before we get started, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit fanduel.com/lockedon to get started. So before we actually totally get started here, a happy opening day to all you baseball fans out there, including this Nationals fan that I record a show with. But hey, we all have our issues, right? Speaking of issues, boy, it is going to be a toilet bowl tonight when the Pittsburgh Penguins take on the Columbus Blue Jackets. As I said in the cold open, Penguins and Blue Jackets play tonight. And for as bad as the Pittsburgh Penguins have been so far this season, it's pretty safe to say the Columbus Blue Jackets have been worse. Hunter, I'm going to steal a little bit of your thunder here because just before we hit record, you hit me with some stats on this team in the very recent few games. And Penguins fans, count your blessings because it could always be worse. Columbus Blue Jackets are currently in the midst of a 5-game losing streak in which on this current road trip and this streak, they have been outscored 26-9 and they have lost 8 of their last 9 games. So the Penguins will look to build on a pretty consistently solid effort against an actual contender earlier this week in the Carolina Hurricanes. They will try to get another win tonight against these Columbus Blue Jackets who are struggling mightily. So, Hunter, other than continuing to be the Columbus Blue Jackets' big brother, how do the Penguins get a win tonight?
They got to really do exactly what they did to shut down the Hurricanes, keeping everything to the outside, making sure you're boxing out the Blue Jackets' high-end talent. And I know the Jackets don't have as much high-end talent as the Hurricanes do, but they still have some pretty decent players in this lineup. I know the Jackets flat out stink this year. You ran some of the numbers that I gave you before the recording. This team freaking stinks, but Johnny Gaudreau, even though he only has 11 goals, he does have 54 points in 72 games. You always have to be on high alert for him. Zach Werenski has 46 points. You have Boone Jenner, who has scored 22 goals for the Blue Jackets this season. He has been very good throughout his career overall. I mean, I don't think he's a top line center on a Stanley Cup contender, but I think on a contender, he's a number 2 center. At least I don't think he's a number 3 unless you just have 2 franchise superstars in the prime of their careers ahead of them. But he's had a really solid year overall. Kirill Marchenko, it looks like he's going to be in the lineup this time after he was, for some reason, a healthy scratch against the Penguins the last time these two teams played. I don't know what the heck Pascal Vincent was doing there. So it's really all about shutting down that high-end talent for the Jackets and getting to also a young goaltender that the Jackets are going to be starting tonight. They're going to be starting Daniel Tarasov. He's played in 21 games this season. He's actually been the better goalie between him and Elvis Merzlikins. Yes, he's only 7-10-3 overall with a 3.24 goals against average, but he does have a .904 save percentage, which is kind of around league average overall. That is better than Merzlikins, who has a .897 save percentage. But no matter what, the Penguins are going to have the edge in goal for this one with Alex Nedeljkovic starting, and I'm a big fan of that overall. I like that Sullivan is riding the hot hand and is kind of putting Jarry on the shelf for a little bit just because his play has really dipped in the month of March overall. But I want to see the Penguins continue to assert their dominance over a Blue Jackets team that they have owned for the last several years. I mean, they're 10-0-1 in their last 11 games against the Jackets dating back to December 12th of 2019. And in their last 25 games against the Jackets, the Penguins are 20-3-2 dating back to 2017. They only have 3 regulation losses in the last 7 years against this Blue Jackets team. This is a Jackets team that is reeling both on the ice and off the ice. They're going to have to get a brand new front office after this year. The Penguins have to take advantage of this overall if they want to win this game.
Yeah, and on the Penguins side of it, we'll get a little bit more into the Nedeljkovic starting decision in the second segment. They will still have the services available of Riley Smith tonight, according to Mike Sullivan. It also appears that Jeff Carter is ready to make his return to the lineup, according to Seth Rorabaugh this morning. He was one of the first players off of the ice in the optional morning skate, which is usually an indication that that person is playing in the game that evening. So who do you think is going to come out of the lineup for a Jeff Carter?
I'm purely guessing on this, and I know we're recording this a little bit before puck drop, and just want to say to everyone, we usually don't record this close to puck drop, but sometimes our work schedules get in the way. This won't be a problem going forward. Just wanted to put that out there for everyone. Hopefully this is not old news by the time you listen to it. But for Carter coming back in, I think Gruden would come out for Carter. I do not want to scratch one of Jesse Puljujarvi or Sam Poulin. Poulin has only played in 1 game. We already made our thoughts on his performance pretty clear during our Wednesday episode. We both thought he played fairly well. Didn't really stick out in that good of a way, but it's only his first game. He did go to the net mouth quite a bit, especially in the first period, and I want to see more of that for the second game. There's no reason to take him out for someone like Carter, who, let's face it, Pat, this is probably one of his final games as a member of the Pittsburgh Penguins. I mean, their season is going to be ending in the next couple of weeks. I don't foresee Carter coming back next season unless something weird happens overall. If you want to take someone like Gruden out, okay, that's fine, because I don't think Gruden is going to be on the team on a full-time basis for next season, but do not scratch Poulin or especially Jesse Puljujarvi with the way he has been playing the last 2 games. You want to take someone out, it's got to be Gruden, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think Puljujarvi, as I said last episode, really solidified himself as somebody who should be getting a look the rest of the way out. And I don't think it is good for the development of Sam Poulin at this point to take him out of the lineup after just 1 game. Now, granted, I don't think it would exactly be detrimental to him because he is, let's face it, behind schedule, so to speak, for where he should be as a prospect in the Penguins system. So at this point, I think he kind of understands where he is. But I think in the maybe not long term, but medium term, it would be in the best interest to keep him in and give him another look, especially because you look at a team like Columbus, it's cookie night for a lot of these guys. You don't want to underestimate them because it's the National Hockey League. Yeah, this Blue Jackets team is not good, but they still have managed to win 23 games this season. So this isn't a team that, while they are pretty bad, you can lose to anybody on any night in the National Hockey League. We've seen this happen forever and ever. Amen. So at the same time, if you can get Sam Poulin into the lineup against a team like this, you might as well, just to give him a shot to maybe get that first goal or put up a couple points. And you saw him be effective with Puljujarvi in that bottom 6 role. So you play against the lesser team, unlike Carolina, they can have a chance to do maybe even more than they did on Tuesday night.
Why call him up if you're only going to play him for a game and then scratch him for someone who's probably not going to be back on the team next season? It just doesn't really make that much sense to me overall. And we all saw the injection of youth that the Penguins had against Carolina and how much that helped some of the core players in that game. Why go away from it? I mean, I understand you want to get Carter back in, but it can't be at the expense of 2 young players who really could be on this team on a full-time basis for next season.
Absolutely. And we'll be looking for a very similar result as we've seen the first 2 times against these teams. Penguins won both games by identical 5-3 scores. We really hope that we can see that again, because this is the first time in all of 2 days that these teams will meet. They will meet again on Saturday night. But that is going to do it for this first segment. When we come back, we are going to talk about Mike Sullivan's decision to keep riding the hot hand with Alex Nedeljkovic. But before we do that, we have to tell you about our sponsor, and that is FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and you can even pick who is going to win it all. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. All right, we're back here on the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. And kind of a surprising decision this morning from Mike Sullivan. He is sticking with the hot hand in Alex Nedeljkovic. I say surprising before we fully dive into it because this did feel like where this team is at this point in the season. They were probably just going to rotate goalies because at this point, you're not, despite everything that the players, the coaches, the management are saying, they know where they are in the standings. They know where this season is likely to end. So at this point, you want to get looks at everybody. You want to give everybody a chance to essentially play for next year. But instead, Mike Sullivan is going to be starting Alex Nedeljkovic over Tristan Jarry. And we have talked about it ad nauseum on this show since the summer. They made the bet on Tristan Jarry that he could be this team's long-term starting goalie. And he has struggled, much like the rest of the team. I want to make sure that's clear, in the month of March. And now they're sticking with Nedeljkovic.
I wasn't too surprised to see it when Mike Sullivan announced it to the media on Thursday morning after the morning skate. Why would you not ride the hot hand after the way Nedeljkovic played against Carolina on Tuesday? 39 saves on 40 shots. He was tremendous throughout those 60 minutes. Yeah, he didn't have to do as much in the third period compared to the second period or even maybe the first period. I think the second period, that was when he was the most busiest and he had to come up with a large amount of 10 bell saves compared to the first and third periods, but he was still great for the Penguins against one of the best teams in the NHL. Why would you not continue to ride that even though you're playing a bad Columbus Blue Jackets team? If I had to guess, and this is strictly a guess right now, they're going to play Nedeljkovic in this one, obviously, and then they'll play Jarry on Saturday, maybe as like a rotating thing to get one of the goalies starting against the Blue Jackets once, and then the other goalie will start against the Jackets in the other game. I could be dead wrong on that, but that's the way I'm thinking right now. But with how Jarry has played in March, you owe it to yourselves, as Sullivan even said to media, you got to ice your best possible lineup out there overall. And right now, Nedeljkovic is giving your team a better chance to win over Jarry. It's no secret that Jarry has been really bad in the month of March. His numbers have really dipped, much like they were last year. It's definitely becoming a bit of a concern of mine. I wouldn't say right when the new year turns, Jarry gets bad. It's kind of right when the games really start to get big, his game kind of dips. And that's concerning heading into the offseason where he still has 4 more years left on that contract. And Nedeljkovic, he's playing for a new contract this summer. Whether it's in Pittsburgh or whether it's for someone else, he's playing for a pretty big raise. And I think no matter what happens at the end of this season and with these starts, he is going to get a pretty hefty raise by either the Penguins or another team of the level that he's played at. So I'm happy that Sullivan made this decision.
I definitely think you're right that he's due for a pretty big raise this summer. He has, as I said earlier in the week, he has proven that at the very least, he's a 1B goalie in your system. I still think his ceiling is spot starter, which is basically a guy that you can lean on in a moment like this, where your starting goaltender is starting to falter and may need some time off to get his crap together. I also agree with you. It was another thing I've talked about. It's tough to say because I do think Tristan Jarry has his moments where he looks like he can be a bona fide top goalie in the National Hockey League, but we have continually seen it over the past few seasons. We get into end of February, March, April, and he starts to fall off a cliff. And I said his only escape hatch right now is that the team in front of him is not very good. And he's not, and I don't mean this negatively, he's not Igor Shesterkin. He's not Connor Hellebuck. He's not a guy who can take a mediocre team and make them more competitive. he's a guy who can paper over some deficiencies. He's a guy who can be a starter. But if you're putting all your eggs in the basket of Tristan Jarry, then it's not going to be a very happy Easter for you. So at this point, again, I hate that we have to have this conversation because I think, despite talking about goaltending being the lowest hanging fruit, we've continued to see this trend, and we see it from our listeners all the time. They're not convinced. They're not sold on Tristan Jarry yet. And while I'm not quite there with them, if Kyle Dubas and company go out and make some big changes this offseason, get better forward depth, make some changes on defense, and we're still seeing this type of play from Jarry come this time of the season next year, then I think once and for all, we know who this guy is.
I agree. And honestly, this is maybe a low probability right now, but you remember at the trade deadline, there were a bunch of reports out there that all the goalies in the Penguins system, for the most part, were available. Murashov in Russia, he wasn't available for trade, but there were reports that Nedeljkovic, Jarry, and Blomqvist were all available via trade. And I still could see Jarry potentially being available for trade over the summer. But if you do deal him, you have to have a bona fide replacement ready, whether that's Nedeljkovic, if you want to give him starter type money, which, that's also risky, right? Yeah, he's been pretty solid throughout this season, but we've also seen him in prior seasons where he's been really bad. Which version of him are you going to get for next year, in the year after that, and then potentially the year after that if he gets at least a 3-year deal? What is going to happen with Joel Blomqvist? Is he going to be NHL ready? It looks like he's going to have a great shot at making the team as a backup for next year based on how he's doing in Wilkes-Barre this season. But that's going to be a very interesting conversation that the management and the coaching staff will have once the season comes to an end. Do they want to continue with Jarry heading in next season, even though that was only the first year of his deal, just because of the inconsistencies that we've seen this season? I wouldn't be surprised either way, either if he comes back or if he gets moved, just because, especially with the way he's played down the stretch here, because he's been healthy. Like this isn't someone who has been banged up at all this season. Knock on wood with only 11 games left, but he's been fairly healthy, and we're still seeing this type of inconsistency with him. It's definitely a little concerning.
It is. And to build off your point about Nedeljkovic, if you have a similar roster next year, now granted, they're going to make some kind of changes. That's going to happen this summer, one way or the other, whether it's free agency, whether it's trades, whatever, there will be changes made to this roster. We have seen both sides of Alex Nedeljkovic in his career. When he was on a fairly good, well-built Carolina team, he did all right. He wasn't he was, kind of the same deal. Spot starter, 1A, 1B kind of guy, but he had a really good team in front of him. Then you put him on a team where he's got to carry more of the load in Detroit. Results weren't as good. So it's really tough to tell what you have in him. And then for the Blomqvist thing, I've brought this up multiple times. It's kind of weird that you wouldn't think of the Pittsburgh Penguins as a place that develops goaltenders really well. But since Marc-Andre Fleury, they have had young guys lying in wait, guys who never even played for the Penguins, guys who they traded away in other moves, go on to be starters or at least solid NHL contributors. So maybe there is the factor that they're looking at Joel Blomqvist right now and thinking, we'll have him next year, so we can maybe make Jarry or even Nedeljkovic expendable.
Right. Would you be surprised if Blomqvist made the team? I wouldn't. He would be a pure backup and would probably only start, 25, 26 games next season. But if you can get average goaltending from him and you have a starter, whether that's Jarry, Nedeljkovic, or even someone else that you maybe bring in via free agency or trade, and that player also gives you average goaltending, at least hopefully, that should be good enough for the Penguins to win quite a few games, especially if they're able to make good changes around the core during the offseason and bring in some more younger players that can give this team some oomph that it really needs.
So that's going to do it for this second segment. Penguins and Blue Jackets tonight, 7:00 p.m. at PPG Paints Arena. And when we come back, we're going to keep the focus here a little bit more on the Columbus Blue Jackets, based a lot on the Aaron Portzline article that came out earlier this week about the misfortunes of this franchise. But before we do that, we got to tell you about our next sponsor, and that is eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience what brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Motors Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home the win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit available only to U.S. customers. All right, we're back here. It's the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. And it has been a rough existence, not just this year, but for the majority of the Columbus Blue Jackets history since they came into the league in the 2000-2001 season. We briefly referenced it earlier this week. There is a great piece that came out on Tuesday in The Athletic by Aaron Portzline titled How the Columbus Blue Jackets Became One of the Most Hapless Franchises in Sports. The subhead was also the team that parody forgot, the Columbus Blue Jackets. So as you can imagine, it's not the most spectacular article for the Columbus Blue Jackets. It doesn't look great on them, but at the same time, the thing that stood out most to me for this, when you usually hear about franchises like the Columbus Blue Jackets, there's always the meddlesome ownership. There's always the owner who buys a team and it's their hobby horse. They think, I know more than everybody. I'm a sports guy. I along with however I made my money, I'm also such a big sports fan that anybody can run a sports franchise, and they get in the way. Problem with the Columbus Blue Jackets is it's been mostly bad luck. The ownership group there kind of just stays away. They don't really get involved.
No, they don't. They let the coaches coach, the players play, and the management bring in players, trade players, all that good stuff to try and make them a better team. And I think with the Blue Jackets, it's unfortunate because I want them to become one of the Penguins' top rivals, but it's just been so one-sided over the last decade. I was so excited heading into that 2014 series. It felt like, oh, this is going to be the start of a brand new big rivalry for the Penguins. And that series, it went 6 games, and I was definitely very nervous heading into that third period, especially when the Jackets scored 3 goals to pull within 4-3 in game 6 of that series. And I was like, oh my God, they actually might tie it. But I knew right from that, after that series, or at least I was thinking at the time when I was only 16 or 17, okay, this team might be a thorn in the Penguins' side for quite some time. You then had that series a few years later when both the Blue Jackets and the Penguins were 2 of the top 6 to 7 best teams in the league record-wise. Penguins winning in 5 games. But the Blue Jackets were just never able to catch up to the Penguins overall in terms of the rivalry, right? And it's been sad to see. I feel like they've been mismanaged, especially bad over the past few years. They had that nice stretch a few years ago where they made the playoffs 4 seasons in a row, 5 out of 7 seasons overall. And yes, their qualifying series win over the Toronto Maple Leafs will forever be hilarious. Their win over the Lightning in that playoff series the year before where they swept them, that will forever be hilarious, even though the Lightning went into win the Stanley Cup the next year. Still, it was one heck of a series. But it's just kind of sad that Jarmo Kekalainen wasn't really able to get out of his own way and made plenty of bad moves that have set this franchise back quite a few years. They have some good talent on this team, even outside of Gaudreau. I like Cole Sillinger overall, even though Boone Jenner is a bit older. He's having a good season. Marchenko is really solid. You have Adam Fantilli. He is going to be, I think, a thorn in the Penguin side for quite some time. You have Texier on there. You have even Damon Severson on their back end. He's totally fine. Again, they have young talent. They have other young talent that hasn't even made the NHL yet, but they still need more established NHLers to really push this team back into trying to compete for a playoff spot. And part of me kind of feels bad for Gaudreau in a way because, yeah, I understand he wanted to get closer to home, but I mean, I don't think he envisioned it getting this bad in Columbus right when he signed there. So they have to nail this front office hire. this offseason. I don't know who's going to be their GM. I'm sure they're going to speak to quite a few people, but they need to bring in someone who actually knows what he's doing and that has an actual vision for this team rather than making moves on a whim and throwing stuff at the wall and hoping that it sticks, like Jarmo Kekalainen tried to do.
Yeah, and you look at their history, and it's not even so much that they're making bonehead hockey guy decisions. They're just putting their bets on all the wrong players. They're missing out on big talent, and sometimes their management group, not their ownership group, their management group would get increasingly impatient and drum guys out right before they would hit their stride or when things would start to build up. And the thing that's nice for them is that despite everything Kekalainen did before he was let go, if you're a young general manager and you're looking to make your mark with a Columbus Blue Jackets opening, there is a lot of good here. There's a very deep prospect pool. There is young talent on the roster right now. And you almost have a team that isn't going to have to do 4, 5, 6 or more years of a rebuild. You could supplant some of the talent you have with what you already have in-house. And with a couple savvy moves, you're going to have this team competitive in the Metropolitan Division, if not becoming a playoff team in a year or two, because it's there for the taking. Now, the saddest part to me, and this was also something I brought up on Tuesday, was that there's a visualization in there for points percentage since they came into the league in the 2000-2001 season. And at the time, the Columbus Blue Jackets had played 1,803 games, and they have a point percentage of 48.4, which is dead last in that era, behind teams like Arizona, Buffalo, Edmonton, the Florida Panthers, New York Islanders, Anaheim Ducks, Ottawa Senators, teams that have been in the bottom of the barrel for extended periods of time over the last 24 years. And I feel bad because Columbus is a great town. There's Ohio State right there. It is a big time sports town. And you see it when you see games at Nationwide Arena. This fan base is loyal. They support.
I was going to bring that up. They sell out every game there at Nationwide. They've
come close.
Yes, their attendance has not been a problem at all this season, even though they're one of the worst teams in the league. Their fans are still showing up because they're that loyal to the franchise. Even though they're not playing well these last few years, they know the playoffs, at least a little bit of the playoff success that they've had over the last several years. I know they had that series win against the Lightning, as I brought up. They had that qualifying series win over the Toronto Maple Leafs. Those series has helped grow new fans in the area, and they're now going to all these games. I mean, yeah, you brought up Ohio State. A lot of these people that probably go to Ohio State also go to Blue Jackets games, right? So, I mean, I think this is only going to continue over these next several years. And when this team eventually does get at least decent again, they'll be selling out for a long time. I'll probably have a pretty nice sellout streak as well. That is a very good fan base in Columbus overall.
100%. And as a Penguins fan, as much as I like seeing a division rival teeter in mediocrity, as a fan of the sport, I want to see more rivalries. I want to see them be more competitive. So I am hoping for maybe not a rise to prominence for the Columbus Blue Jackets, but I would like them to be more competitive, to have more watershed moments against the Pittsburgh Penguins, just so we have yet another exciting rivalry in a division that is built off of rivalries. But that is going to do it for the Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. We will be back tomorrow to recap this game and then get you ready for the rematch on Saturday against the Blue Jackets. But for Hunter Hodes, I am Patrick Damp. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and we will be back tomorrow, and let's go Pens.